The Human Security Officer, Part 41. Seconds too late, Penn had realized there was a small device attached to the cargo bay door. It was wedged just near the hinge where the door met the floor of the cargo bay itself. She didn't have much time to process the recognition as atmosphere violently filled the bay. Penn had to grab onto a nearby support beam to keep herself steady. Gareth was far less lucky and found himself flung away from the terminal and thrown to the floor. Pressure equalized and wind force took over. Seconds later, Penn watched as Gareth was taken once again. With nothing to hold on to, and little chance of fighting the forces flinging him about, he was sucked up the mangled hanging bay door into open sky. A few things occurred to Penn in quick succession. An orange sky, not void, was splayed out beyond the back of the ship. In addition, atmosphere of some kind filled the bay. By luck, it seemed that the Nebula was close to a planet at the very least. Tunny T's voice came over the intercom, but the ripping wind made comprehension near impossible. In any case, she didn't have time to wait and focus on what they were saying. She acted. Letting go of the pillar and surging forward, Penn grabbed the armor container as she passed. Her feet never stopped, and she was quickly gaining more momentum than she'd be able to counteract. As she neared the newly created exit to the ship, she threw the container forward and without letting go allowed it to take her into the open sky. The last thing she noted was Tunny T's face coming on the main terminal, their odd beak-like mouth moving rapidly. As Tunny T's face was replaced by an open sky and a rapidly receding ship, Penn righted herself and immediately started scanning for Gareth. Her hands moved simultaneously, set to a task of their own. She opened the container and started to pull pieces of the Hawk out and attach them. First her wrists, then waist, and finally ankles. It was by no means an easy task, but this very situation was one any paratrooper was trained for, and by the time she had each piece locked into place, she'd found her companion. Quite opposite to Penn, who had instantly oriented herself in her descent, Gareth was flailing and spinning. He was quite clearly screaming as well, but no sound was making more than a few centimeters from his mouth. Penn closed the container and let go of it, nudging it in the same direction the ship was headed. She pressed her arms to her side and angled her descent towards Gareth. Without any kind of covering for her eyes, the wind stung as it whipped by, but she kept her trajectory and quickly closed the distance between them. Still in freefall and spinning wildly, it took Gareth a moment to notice the familiarly large creature hurtling towards the ground next to them. If the situation weren't what it was, Penn would have laughed at the visible emotional roller coaster Gareth experienced in a matter of seconds. Terror, confusion, recognition, and then back to terror. The first thing she did was carefully grapple him to stop his spinning. This also muted his flailing. He tried to yell to her but could barely hear his own voice. Penn confirmed her inability to hear him by tapping her hand to her ear and shaking her head. With the stability, Gareth managed the presence of mind to reach his hand up and interact with his translator. Penn heard a slight high-pitched click in her ear, followed by a series of other clicks, and finally a translated voice came through. "Can you hear me?" "Yeah. Listen. You need to wrap your arms around my neck and your legs around my own. We're falling slower than normal, but cutting speed is going to be rough. You need to hold on with everything you've got, even if it hurts. You hear me?" What if dash? They continued to hurtle. No what ifs. This is what's happening. No matter what, you stay with me. Gareth followed her instructions, even grabbing onto her sides with his ancillary arms. Incredibly, she returned to the aerodynamic pose and shot towards the ground. His hearts raced and his instinct was to pull away, flail and protest. Nevertheless, he pushed it all down and clung as tightly as he could. Not that it was very hard, as his instincts were also screaming at him to secure himself to the nearest solid object, which in this case was Penelope. Amid the terror, Gareth gave a moment to lament the fact that these kinds of things did not happen before she came aboard. Atmosphere rushed past, an all-consuming roaring and whipping. The way he was positioned pushed him into Penn, but he held tight anyway, bracing for the dreaded moment that things changed. It took too long. He didn't know what a roller coaster was, but he now knew what that pit-like feeling of continually building anticipation was. After a short time, Penn spread her arms and legs, catching as much air as possible and slowing their descent. Soon after, she totally reoriented herself and took the same position she had when she dropped onto Raxia. She'd be using all the fuel to make the landing as easy as possible. The G-forces wouldn't be nearly enough to affect her, but she wasn't too sure about her companion. Even a slow descent might force him to black out. That wasn't her only worry either. She'd trained for Allied equipment failure. She was following the same protocol as if a friend's gear had unexpectedly failed and she was their lifeline. But all of that assumed another human's ability to hold onto her, which was no easy feat, and Gareth was no human. No point in worrying now, she supposed. She shot a prayer to anything that was listening and hit the jets. Gareth was praying as well, begging the light of his home star to shine on him. And perhaps it was, as even though the force of slowing from the initial activation jerked him upward, he kept his arms locked around Penn's neck and managed to hold on. After that initial burst, things got easier for a time. Forces equalized and Gareth found some small hope that he might not find himself a very unsightly smear on the rocks of some random planet in the middle of nowhere. In fact, he had so much hope that he tried to open his eyes to look around. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a very bad idea. He'd managed to stay conscious through the increased G-force, but as he looked down, he saw a steep jutting of rock all but blitzing straight at him. With a shock of terror too much for his system, he blacked out and started to go limp around Penelope. "Fuck!" Penn yelled to everyone and no one. Instinctually, her left hand shot around to secure Gareth before he could slip away. She managed to stay her strength just enough to keep him in place but not shatter his midsection. Catching him, however, completely threw the careful balance of thrusters, slowing their descent. With the left one gone, her right hand had no counterbalance and immediately threw her into the side of the rock formation. Again, on instinct, she turned her back to it to keep Gareth from grinding against the incline. Simultaneously, she reoriented her right hand to rebalance. Rock and gravel ran across her back painfully, but she pushed it away and kept her focus on a safe descent. They'd already slowed considerably. She was honestly proud of Gareth for holding on as well as he did for as long as he had. Just a few more seconds. It wouldn't be pretty with a missing thruster, but she'd make do. Just as she thought that, however, her foot caught on a small jutting stone and she was sent head over heels. Again, her back slammed into the steep rock formation and the air was forced from her lungs. She kept the presence of mind to cut the jets, bring her other arm around Gareth, and adjust so that she was rolling side over side. Thankfully, they'd slowed enough that, though incredibly unpleasant, she wasn't going to die from the impact. The rock formation turned from sharp incline to shallow angle and Penn let herself roll along the dirt and gravel till she came to a final, merciful, stop at the bottom of the rock formation. For a moment she didn't move. Gareth lay unmoving on her chest, though, and quickly she grew concerned. She'd made her arms a brace as they rolled so that either her forearms or back were the thing taking the most punishment. She gently brought a hand to his face. "Gareth?" She sat up and cradled him in her arms. "Come on, you stuck-up son of a..." "I did not jump up the back of the fucking Nebula just for you to fuck off anyway." "I suppose that would be rather rude of me," he answered weakly.